The sterile white walls of the Sinclair private wing felt like they were closing in on me. I stood in the middle of the hallway, clutching a thick manila folder that contained the blueprint of my entire life, a life that was never actually mine. Through the heavy glass door of the observation suite, I could see my father, Dr. Benedict Sinclair, leaning over my sister Gemma's bed. He wasn't looking at her face, he was looking at the monitors, tracking her failing vitals like a stockbroker watching a crashing market. My mother, Vivienne, sat in the corner, dabbing her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, already rehearsing the tragic speech she would give to the press. When Benedict saw me, he didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer a hug. He walked out, checked his watch, and spoke in the same tone he used for his laboratory assistants. Romy, the compatibility tests are back. Gemma's liver is failing faster than we anticipated. We need to begin the prep for your procedure by 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's a partial transplant, so you'll recover, but we can't afford any more delays. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man whose last name I carried, and for the first time, I didn't see a father. I saw a technician looking at a piece of equipment. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, a sharp, jagged sound that startled them. A procedure, Benedict? Is that what I am to you? A well-maintained warehouse of biological resources? Vivienne gasped, her carefully applied mask of grief slipping. Romy, don't be so dramatic. Your sister is dying. You were always the resilient one, the healthy child. It's your responsibility to sustain her. My responsibility? I whispered, stepping closer until I could see the cold, clinical calculation in Benedict's eyes. My only purpose was to survive until she needed me, wasn't it? You didn't raise a daughter. You raised a living insurance policy. But today, the policy is void. I took the folder and dropped it at his feet. The papers spilled out. Old, yellowed birth certificates, unauthorized DNA sequences, and a police report from a city 300 miles away. Benedict's face went from pale to a ghostly, terrifying white. The secret they had guarded for 24 years was lying on the hospital floor, and the design donor had finally reclaimed her voice. But to understand how I ended up standing in a cold hospital hallway defying a world-famous surgeon, you have to understand the fairy tale I lived in for 2 decades. Growing up as a Sinclair was supposed to be the ultimate privilege. We lived in a sprawling estate in the suburbs of Connecticut, a house made of glass and expensive stone. Benedict was the genius who decoded rare diseases, and Vivienne was the beautiful philanthropist who chaired every gala in the city. And then there was Gemma and me. Gemma was my younger sister, born with a rare genetic disorder that made her skin translucent and her breath shallow. From the moment I could walk, I was told that I was her guardian angel. If Gemma needed blood, I was there. If Gemma needed a bone marrow match, I was the one who went under the needle. My parents praised my bravery, and for a long time, I wore that praise like a badge of honor. I loved Gemma. I thought our bond was sacred because our blood was identical. I believed the reason I was barred from summer camps and school trips was because I was too precious to the family to risk an injury. We need to keep you pristine, Romy, Vivienne would say, tucking me into bed. You are the key to our family's survival. I believed her. I excelled in school, I worked hard to make them proud, and I accepted the red flags as normal parts of a high-stakes life. I remember my 16th birthday. I had won a prestigious science fair and was offered an internship in London. It was my dream. When I told Benedict, he didn't congratulate me. He looked at my medical chart instead. London is too far, Romy. What if Gemma has a crisis? We can't have our primary match on a 10-hour flight when she might need a transfusion. You'll stay local. I've already declined the offer for you. I was heartbroken, but I complied. I stayed. I went to a local university. I kept my phone on 24/7. But the older we got, the stranger things became. I noticed that Benedict was obsessed with my health, in a way that felt invasive. He didn't care if I was happy. He cared about my protein intake, my lung capacity, and my liver enzymes. He would run routine tests on me every month in his private lab, never showing me the data. The real shift happened when I met Arlo. He was an investigative journalist with a sharp eye for inconsistencies. When I told him about my family's medical history, he didn't see a beautiful story of sacrifice. He saw a pattern of total control. Romy, he said one evening, looking over the few medical documents I had managed to sneak out. Have you ever noticed that your blood type and Gemma's blood type don't actually match the Punnett square for your parents' types? It's biologically impossible for you to be Benedict's biological daughter if these records are correct. I laughed it off at first. Benedict is a world-class geneticist, Arlo. He wouldn't make a basic mistake like that. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I started looking closer. I noticed my mother, Vivienne, never had photos of her pregnancy with me, only with Gemma. I noticed that there were no records of my birth in the local hospital, even though the Sinclairs had lived in that town for 40 years. The discovery that shattered my world happened 2 weeks ago. I was in Benedict's home office, looking for a charger, when I found a hidden safe behind a collection of vintage medical journals. I knew the code. It was Gemma's birthday. Inside wasn't jewelry or money. It was a file labeled Project S. Inside Project S were documents that turned my life into a psychological thriller. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a designated resource. Benedict hadn't found me in a hospital. He had intercepted me. My biological parents were a young couple who had died in a tragic car accident, an accident where Benedict Sinclair was the first responder. Instead of reporting the infant in the back seat, he saw a perfect genetic match for his sick daughter. He used his power, his wealth, and his medical influence to erase my existence and recreate me as Romy Sinclair. I wasn't his child. I was a stolen asset, raised in a golden cage, kept healthy only so I could be harvested piece by piece to keep Gemma alive. The final blow came when I found the upcoming surgical schedule. Benedict wasn't planning a standard transplant. He was planning a highly experimental, high-risk procedure that would likely leave me with permanent physical limitations, just to give Gemma a 20% better chance of survival. He was willing to discard my future to extend hers. In that moment, the girl who wanted to be a guardian angel died. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them right away. I called Arlo. We spent 72 hours straight connecting the dots, finding the old police reports of a missing child that matched my description, and gathering the evidence of Benedict's medical fraud. I worked with a precision that I had learned from the doctor himself. As I stood in that hospital hallway, dropping the truth at Benedict's feet, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even known I was carrying. I watched him scramble to pick up the papers, his hands shaking, his brilliance failing him for the first time in his life. He looked up at me, his face twisted in a mask of desperation. Romy, listen to me. I saved you. That couple, they were nobodies. I gave you a life of luxury. I gave you an elite education. All I'm asking is for you to protect your sister. She isn't my sister, Benedict, I said, my voice as cold as the surgical steel he loved so much. She's the person you stole my life for. And as for the luxury you gave me, it was just the cost of maintenance for your favorite piece of equipment. I don't owe you my blood. I don't owe you my future. And I certainly don't owe you my silence. I turned to walk away, but Vivienne grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wide with a terrifying kind of greed. You can't leave. Gemma won't survive the week without the transplant. You're her only match. You're a murderer if you walk out that door. I looked at my mother, the woman who had tucked me in while planning how to cut me open. I leaned in close, my voice a deadly whisper. If she dies because you were too arrogant to look for a legal donor. You spent 20 years bankrolling a lie instead of finding a real cure. Don't blame the resource for the farmer's greed. I walked out of the Sinclair private wing, past the security guards who had been paid to keep me in, and out into the crisp night air. Arlo was waiting in the car, his engine running. I didn't look back at the glass hospital. I didn't look back at the life that was built on a foundation of theft. I had the files. I had the truth. And by tomorrow morning, the world would know exactly what kind of miracles Dr. Benedict Sinclair was performing in his private lab. I was free. But I knew the Sinclairs wouldn't let their biological backup go that easily. The war had just begun, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being operated on. I was the one holding the scalpel. Benedict had spent 20 years monitoring my every move, but he had missed the most important change of all. The strong, healthy girl had finally become a woman who was ready to burn his empire to the ground. I looked at Arlo as we sped away from the hospital. Is the file ready for the medical board? Arlo nodded, his expression grim. It's ready. But Romy, once we hit send, there's no going back. They will come for you with everything they have. I leaned back in the seat, watching the city lights blur past. Let them come. I've lived my whole life in their shadow. I think it's time they learned what it feels like to stand in the dark. The true revenge wasn't just about refusing the surgery. It was about dismantling the very idea of the Sinclairs. I wanted to strip them of their names, their wealth, and their prestige. I wanted Benedict to feel the same helplessness I felt when he told me I couldn't go to London. I wanted Vivienne to feel the same hollow ache I felt when I realized my childhood photos were a lie. We spent the rest of the night in a secluded office, finalizing the digital trail. Every illegal blood draw, every forged signature, every unauthorized test. It was all there. I realized then that my career in data science wasn't an accident. I had unconsciously trained myself to find the anomalies in the systems, and Benedict Sinclair was the biggest anomaly of them all. By 4 a.m., the first wave of evidence was sent to the International Medical Ethics Committee. By 5 a.m., the local police department received the reopened missing persons file from 24 years ago. And by 6 a.m., the time Benedict had scheduled my harvest, I was sitting in a quiet diner, watching the sun rise over a world that finally knew my real name. But the most chilling part of the night wasn't the documents. It was a realization I had while scrolling through Benedict's private server. I found a folder labeled Replacement. I opened it, expecting more of my own medical data. Instead, I found the profile of another young girl, barely 5 years old, with the same rare blood type as Gemma. Benedict wasn't just using me, he was already scouting for the next guardian angel. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about stopping a predator who used medicine as a cloak for his crimes. I closed the laptop, my jaw set. The Sinclairs thought they were losing a daughter. They were actually about to lose their freedom. "Are you okay?" Arlo asked, placing a hand on mine. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a reflection of the girl my parents wanted me to be. I saw myself. "I'm better than okay, Arlo." I'm finally awake. As the morning news began to break with reports of a massive scandal at the Sinclair Institute, I knew the first part of my plan was working. The fairy tale was over. The nightmare was ending. And for the first time in my life, I was the one writing the ending. The sun hadn't even fully cleared the horizon when the first digital domino fell. Sitting in the back of Arlo's car, I watched the refresh button on the National Medical Board's portal. At 8:02 a.m., the status of Dr. Benedict Sinclair's license changed from active to under emergency review. It was a cold, clinical kill shot. "They've frozen his credentials," Arlo whispered, his eyes locked on his own laptop. "The hospital's legal department just got the ping. Benedict is officially locked out of his own surgical suite." The revenge wasn't just about stopping a surgery, it was about stripping the man of the only thing he truly loved, his God complex. Benedict didn't care about money, and he clearly didn't care about family. He cared about being the smartest person in the room. By 9 a.m., I made sure he was the most scrutinized person in the country. We drove to a small, private airstrip on the edge of the state. I didn't want to be in a house they owned, or a hotel they could track. Arlo had arranged a meeting with a woman named Sarah Miller. She was 62 years old, a retired librarian from Oregon, and for 24 years, she had been a ghost haunting the missing persons databases. When we met in the quiet corner of a terminal cafe, the air seemed to vibrate. Sarah didn't look at my clothes, or my expensive Sinclair-funded jewelry. She looked at my eyes. She let out a breath that sounded like a decade of held tension. "You have your mother's gaze," she said, her voice thick with a grief that was finally beginning to heal. "They told us the car went over the embankment and that no one survived. They said the fire was too intense to find you." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Benedict hadn't just found me. He had likely arrived at the crash site and realized that an unclaimed infant was the answer to his dying daughter's prayers. He didn't just steal a child. He stole a grieving family's right to say goodbye. "I'm not Romy," I told her, my voice cracking for the first time. "I'm Elena." While I was reclaiming my name, the Sinclair empire was imploding. Arlo's contacts in the media had released the Project S files. The headline on the New York Times digital edition sent shockwaves through the medical community. "The designed donor, elite surgeon accused of kidnapping infant for organ harvesting." But the darkest revelation was yet to come. As I sifted through the final encrypted folder I had pulled from Benedict's home server, I found a subdirectory labeled Maintenance Logs. I expected medical charts. Instead, I found time-stamped screenshots from hidden cameras embedded in the smoke detectors and clocks of my bedroom and bathroom. My blood turned to ice. Benedict hadn't just monitored my blood sugar and heart rate. He had watched me sleep. He had watched me dress. He was obsessed with the purity of his resource. He treated me like a laboratory animal under constant surveillance to ensure no external contaminants, like a secret boyfriend or an unapproved diet, could compromise the quality of the organs he intended to take. Arlo, look at this, I said, turning the screen away, because I couldn't bear to see my own privacy violated again. Arlo's face turned a shade of crimson I had never seen. This isn't just medical fraud anymore, Elena. This is a felony that will put him away for life. This is predatory stalking. We didn't wait for the police to find him. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized his perfectly managed asset had outplayed him. We drove back to the hospital, which was now surrounded by news vans and patrol cars. I walked through the front doors, Arlo right behind me. The staff, people who had known me since I was a child, shrunk away. They didn't see the guardian angel anymore. They saw a walking scandal. I found Benedict in his private office. He wasn't crying. He was frantically shredding documents. His expensive silk tie loosened, his eyes wild. Vivienne was there too, screaming into her phone at a lawyer, who had clearly already hung up on her. The police are in the lobby, Benedict, I said, standing in the doorway. He spun around, a handful of paper strips in his hand. You ungrateful brat. Do you have any idea what I did for you? I plucked you from a wreck. I gave you a life. That girl in the back of a sedan would never have known. You didn't give me a life, I shouted over him, my voice filling the room with a power I had suppressed for 20 years. You gave me a prison sentence with a view. You watched me through cameras. You measured my worth in liters of blood and grams of tissue. You aren't a doctor, Benedict. You're a poacher. Vivienne lunged at me, her fingernails clawing for my face. Gemma is going into heart failure because of you. You've killed her. I caught her wrists, staring her down with a coldness that froze her in place. No, Vivienne. Gemma is dying because you were too obsessed with Sinclair blood to put her on a national registry. You chose a crime over a cure. If she dies today, her blood is on your hands, not mine. The detectives pushed past me then. The sound of the handcuffs clicking into place was the most melodic thing I had ever heard. As they led Benedict out, he tried to maintain his dignity, holding his head high, but he tripped on the mountain of shredded evidence he had created. He looked small. He looked pathetic. In the months that followed, the Sinclair name was scrubbed from every building and every journal. Benedict was sentenced to 30 years for kidnapping, medical battery, and surveillance crimes. Vivienne received 10 years for her role in the conspiracy. The estate in Connecticut was sold to pay for the massive civil lawsuit I filed on behalf of the Miller estate. Gemma survived. In a final twist of fate, the publicity of the case brought forward a legal donor, a distant cousin she never knew existed. She received her transplant, but she woke up to a world where her parents were monsters, and her sister was a stranger who shared nothing with her but a traumatic past. I don't hate Gemma. I pity her. She was a victim of their obsession just as much as I was, though her cage was lined with sympathy instead of expectations. I stand now on a cliffside in Oregon, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. I'm no longer Romy Sinclair. I am Elena Miller. My Aunt Sarah is in the house behind me, making tea. There are no cameras in the clocks. There are no routine blood draws. My body is finally my own sanctuary, not a warehouse. The lesson for every woman watching this is simple. Your value is not defined by how much of yourself you can give away. Society, and sometimes even your own family, will try to convince you that your duty is to be the pillar that holds everyone else up, even as your own foundation crumbles. They will call you strong and resilient just to keep you from noticing that you're being used. Do not let them turn your empathy into a debt. You do not owe your health, your peace, or your future to anyone who views you as a means to an end. True family doesn't monitor your worth. They celebrate your existence. I was the genetic debt that was never supposed to be paid. I broke the cycle, I took my name back, and I realized that the most important transplant I ever had was removing the Sinclairs from my soul. And now, I have to ask you, is there someone in your life who treats you like a resource instead of a person? Are you being praised for your sacrifices while your own dreams are being bled dry? It's time to stop being the guardian of someone else's empire and start building your own. Are you ready to stop being an insurance policy and start being a person?